Welcome to the Prepper Almanac. Thank you for joining us today. We deeply appreciate your time and interest. In today's video, we are going to delve into a topic that's as fascinating as it is practical. Ordinary plants you can turn into bread when resources are limited after a long-term disaster or societal collapse. Our ancestors knew the secrets of the land, and they used this knowledge to survive and thrive in times of scarcity. They turned ordinary plants into sustenance, creating nourishing bread from the most unlikely of sources. Today, we're going to explore these ancient practices and find out how we can apply them in our own lives. So, if you're intrigued by the idea of turning wild plants into rustic hearty bread, or if you're simply curious about the resilience and ingenuity of our forebears, stick around. And remember, if you find value in today's video, please smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments, so don't forget to leave them below. In times of scarcity, our ancestors turned to their surroundings for sustenance. They gleaned the land, foraging wild plants to transform into nourishing bread. Wheat cultivation, though a significant milestone in human history, didn't spell the end of this tradition. In fact, our forebears continued to grind wild plants into flour, a clever strategy to extend their provisions. These plants, often overlooked or dismissed as ordinary, provided an extraordinary benefit. They were a lifeline, a means of survival when the wheat fields lay bare or the harvest was poor. Today, we refer to this practice as foraging, a term that perhaps doesn't fully capture the ingenuity and resourcefulness it embodies. Wild plants might not produce the fluffy, smooth white bread you're accustomed to, but they can create rustic and hearty loaves that are just as nourishing. They can be a testament to human resilience, a reminder of our ability to adapt and thrive, even in challenging times. Have you ever heard of amaranth? Often referred to as pigweed, this large weed was a staple food of the ancient Aztecs. At a height of 4 to 8 inches, amaranth produces stalks abundant with seeds that can be harvested for a variety of culinary uses. The Aztecs ingeniously used it to create atoll, a hot cereal, tamales, and even tortillas. As the seasons change and autumn paints the leaves in hues of gold and red, amaranth seeds can be harvested. These seeds, once dried in a sunny area, can be ground into a fine flour, which boasts a mild, nutty taste. This unassuming weed, once a cornerstone of Aztec cuisine, is now largely forgotten. Yet, it holds potential to be a valuable addition to your homemade bread when you need it most. Amaranth, a forgotten staple, is a great one to check out to be ready when resources may be limited after a potential societal collapse. Rye, a cereal grain that grows wild, and as a planted cover crop throughout the United States, is closely related to barley and wheat. It's a staple in many diets around the world, and it's not hard to see why. Rye grows 3 to 4 feet tall and contains long, narrow seeds that you can harvest in the fall when the plant has browned. The traditional method of making rye flour involves a process called winnowing, which is the act of tossing and crushing the seeds, also known as berries, by hand. The chaff, lighter than the seeds, is carried away by the wind, leaving behind the valuable grain. This grain is then ground into a fine flour, adding a robust and slightly tangy flavor to your bread. Rye, a versatile grain, can be a valuable addition to your foraging skill set, and a unique ingredient in your homemade bread when resources are scarce. So next time you're out in the fields, keep an eye out for these tall stalks of rye. Next is wild rice, and yes, it is out there, especially in the upper Midwest of the United States, and you can make it into a flour for flatbread. Wild rice, or zizania, is a type of aquatic grass whose seeds have been a staple in the diet of Native Americans for centuries. Despite its name, it is not really rice, but is more accurately called the seed of aquatic grass. This native delicacy is easy to process into flour, because it requires little to no prep work. All you need to do is grind it until it's a fine powder and then sift it to remove any large bits. The result is a unique nutty flour that brings a whole new depth of flavor to your homemade bread. So, if you're lucky enough to live in an area where wild rice grows or you stumble upon it while foraging, don't pass it up. Wild rice, a native delicacy, can be a valuable item to add to your list during a long-term disaster situation when resources may be scarce. You've probably seen cattails growing wild in marshy spaces or spots where water runs off. But did you know that every part of the prolific plant is edible? Many of the cattails still growing wild in the United States were planted during World War II as an alternative flour source during a wheat shortage. You make the flour from cattail rhizomes, or the part that is underground all year long. You first soak these roots in water, then peel them and cut them into pieces before mashing them. Once the mash is dry, you crush it to make flour. Cattail can be a valuable addition to your homemade bread. So if you're lucky enough to live in an area where cattails grow, or you stumble upon it while foraging, don't pass it up. This is another way to be prepared. In the land of sun, sand, and sea, we find another flour source, the coconut. South Florida is the only place in the United States that has coconut-producing palm trees, since the trees require a tropical climate to produce fruit. But it's not just the fruit that's useful. The flesh of the coconut, once dried and ground, transforms into a fine white powder. This is coconut flour, a pleasingly mild-tasting ingredient that could be the missing link in your homemade bread recipe. Once you've extracted the coconut milk, the remaining flesh doesn't go to waste. Instead, it's dried and ground into flour. This means you end up with 2 nutritional cooking items for the price or time of 1. In the marshy landscapes and along the waterways, we come across the curly dock, a perennial plant that thrives in wet areas, including ditches, along roads and trails, and in crop fields and orchards. This wetland wonder is more than just a common sight, it's a prepper's dream. Like the cattail, the curly dock's roots, leaves, stems, and seeds are all edible. To harness its potential as a flour source, you'll need to harvest the seeds when the stalks are brown and dry. Simply cut the entire stem using clippers or a sharp knife. Then you can strip the seeds from the stem by hand into a large basket. These seeds, once dried and ground, yield a unique flour, adding a distinct flavor to your homemade bread. So the next time you pass a patch of curly dock on your foraging trip, gather some up and test your skills so you are ready when resources dry up. In the midst of your backyard or local park, you might spot a familiar sight, the yellow dandelions. Often seen as a pesky weed, the dandelion is actually a treasure trove of potential. So far, we've been focusing on flour from unlikely plant sources, but you can make dandelion flour from the plant's bright yellow petals. Be sure to gather your dandelions from areas that have not been sprayed with chemicals, and collect the blooms when they are fully open. Wash them thoroughly, and allow them to dry. Then pluck the petals from the green base, removing any green parts as these can add a bitter flavor. Once you've gathered enough petals, they can be dried and ground into a fine powder, ready to be used as flour. So next time you see a field dotted with these yellow beauties, don't just see them as weeds. See them as a source of food when disaster strikes. While we've been exploring wild and natural sources for our flour, let's shift gears a bit and turn our attention to the almond. Although almond trees are not native to North America, the United States has become the world's largest almond producer. These trees prefer warm climates, and most varieties thrive from zones 5 to 9. Zones 5, 9 are USDA plant hardiness zones, a map that divides the United States and parts of Canada into different growing zones based on average annual minimum temperatures. The almond isn't just a delicious snack, it's also a fantastic source of flour. Almond flour is an easy-to-make alternative to traditional wheat flour and can usually be swapped in a 1:1 ratio in most recipes. To make almond flour, just blend almonds until they reach a fine, powdery consistency. But remember, don't blend too long or you'll end up with almond butter, which, while delicious, is not our goal today. Almonds can be a valuable addition to your education on making bread with alternate means when resources are scarce. Acorns, abundant in many parts of the country, can be transformed into a rich-tasting flour. Acorns are often overlooked, but they are actually a bountiful resource. They're the seeds of oak trees, and they're packed with nutrition. In fact, acorns were a staple food for many indigenous peoples, and they can be a valuable addition to your skill set to learn about further, to be ready for a societal collapse when resources are limited. Acorns are rich in carbohydrates, protein, and healthy fats. They also contain essential minerals such as calcium, potassium, and magnesium. But what sets acorns apart is their fiber content. They're a great source of soluble and insoluble fiber, which can help keep your gut healthy and your blood sugar levels stable. Please note, acorns are naturally high in tannins, a type of compound that can make them taste bitter. But don't let that deter you. With a bit of preparation, you can remove these tannins and transform acorns into a delicious nutty flour. So, how do you remove the tannins? The simplest method is to soak the acorns in water. This leaching process can take a few days, but it's worth the wait. You'll know it's done when the water no longer turns a dark color. Once the tannins are gone, you can dry the acorns and grind them into flour. This flour won't behave exactly like wheat flour, it won't rise as much, and it will give your bread a denser texture, but it will also give it a unique, nutty flavor. And remember, you can always mix acorn flour with other types of flour to create your own custom blends. In a world where resources might become scarce, knowing how to utilize what's around you can be a lifesaver. Acorns are a perfect example of this. They're plentiful, nutritious, and with a bit of know-how, they can be transformed into a versatile ingredient. The process of turning acorns into flour involves a few key steps. The journey from tree to table begins with the collection of acorns. We're looking for large, recently fallen acorns, so timing is key. Once you've gathered at least a gallon of acorns, it's time to get cracking, literally. Remove the caps and break open the acorns. This is your first glimpse of the raw material that will soon become your flour. But we're not grinding just yet. First, we need to dry the acorns. This step is crucial, not just for the flour making process, but also to ensure a longer shelf life for your acorn stash. Now comes a bit of a tedious task, but bear with me. You need to separate the acorn skin and shells from the nut meats. It might take some time, but it's worth it. Remember, our ancestors did the same process, and we'll need this skill set to be ready for a societal collapse. The next step is leaching, a process to remove the tannins that give acorns their bitter taste. This involves soaking the acorn nut meats in water. Some prefer a few hours, others a few days. It really depends on how bitter your acorns are and how patient you are. Once the acorns are leached, it's time to mash them. This breaks down the nuts further, preparing them for the final step. After mashing, make sure to dry the nut meats again. This ensures that your flour doesn't end up clumpy. And finally, grinding. The goal is to turn the dried mashed acorns into a fine powder. Depending on your resources, you can use a traditional stone grinder or a modern kitchen blender. Just remember to sift the flour afterwards to ensure a smooth texture. And there you have it, acorn flour ready for your next loaf of bread. In a world of convenience, the art of making your bread may seem archaic. Yet it's an essential skill, one that embodies the very essence of self-reliance. This isn't just about baking, it's about survival, resilience, and the ability to sustain ourselves when the luxuries of the modern world are stripped away. Imagine, if you will, a societal collapse or a long-term disaster. The grocery stores are empty, the supply chains are disrupted, and the conveniences we've become accustomed to are no longer available. In such a situation, the ability to turn ordinary plants into bread becomes invaluable, and in times of crisis, it can become a valuable bartering tool. A loaf of fresh bread could be traded for other essential items like clean water, medical supplies, or even protection. Moreover, the knowledge of how to make bread from the wild plants around us makes us less dependent on conventional resources. It's a testament to human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and resilience. As a prepper, knowing how to turn ordinary plants into bread isn't just a survival skill, it's a ticket to self-reliance. As we warp up today's video about the world of foraging and bread making, we hope that we've managed to spark a little curiosity so you are ready in case resources are limited in the future. Remember, we're always here to answer any questions you may have, and we're eager to hear your thoughts. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss in the future, feel free to drop a suggestion in the comment section below. We love hearing from you, and your ideas often fuel our creativity. Your feedback on today's video is also invaluable. Did you find it informative? Exciting? Let us know. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on all things prepping. Lastly, based on YouTube's algorithm and your viewing history, there's a video recommendation waiting for you in the top left corner of your screen. Until next time, stay safe and keep prepping.